Welcome back, everybody, to IndyFest. I cannot tell you how long I have been waiting to have these two next guests. Some of you may be unfamiliar with, but they are two of the smartest, most insightful and incisive analysts. Amy's already rolling her eyes at me. Amy Walter and I go way, way back, longer than either of us want to think, when our kids were babies, I think, and even before her kid was a baby. Amy Walter's the publisher and editor-in-chief of the Cook Political Report. And David Wasserman is the senior editor and elections analyst, and he knows more about all of the races around the country than any human being. Thank you to both of you for being here. I gather from Amy's rolling of her eyes that she can hear me. You can hear us too, Mr. Wasserman, yes?
I can.
I can, all right, great. I'm here with Gabby Birenbaum, our great DC reporter. Let me start with you, Amy. You've been doing this for a long time, as I mentioned. What's different about this year, if anything?
Oh my gosh. So I guess probably the easiest way to characterize what's different about this year is that both the electorate and the political class, whether that's reporters or donors or strategists, are no longer estimating Donald Trump. And what's even more, I think, important to appreciate is that he's in a much better position politically. You look at where he sits in polling right now than at any point in his 3 runs for office. So that part feels very, very different. And then we've had these massive events, John, that you would think would have some impact beyond just the margins on the way voters are looking at whether it's Trump or whether it's Harris/Biden. We've had indictments, we've had January 6th, we've had the Dobbs decision, we've had obviously in July switching the top of the ticket out, and yet the margin of movement is just so minor that it is hard to know. When you're asked, I get asked a question all the time about what is going to be the October surprise. What's the thing that's going to push this over to one candidate or the other? And it's like, we've had an October surprise pretty much every month for the last 4 years, and it has not really shifted the political affiliations or assessment of the candidates, which is quite phenomenal. The other thing that I've been thinking through is this idea of what this election is about. If you had to go into a room full of people who don't know anything about American politics, or maybe you had to go into a room full of 8th graders who said, well, what is this election of 2024 about? There's not an easy, pithy answer in the way there has been in previous elections, right? You say 2020, well, it's about COVID and once in a 100-year pandemic and the response to that. And in 2004, we would say it was the war on terror. This one is harder to characterize in like a 2-word or even 1-sentence answer. That doesn't sound, obviously, if you're a partisan, you have a very easy answer to the question about what it's about. But I mean, from a non-affiliated political person's answer, I guess the way to say it is voters once again just trying to decide about what kind of change that they want, and feeling as if the two sides are offering change that is not exactly, it comes with its own risks. But that is also another piece that's different. And finally, I just want to say thank you for having us. I would be remiss if I didn't also pay the compliment back. John Ralston is the guru, not only the guru of all things Nevada, but is one of the best and nicest guys in the business. I love when nice guys finish first, which is what the Indy has been able to do. So that makes me very, very happy to have seen this from the very beginning. And let's face it, I'd rather be in Vegas right now, but I can't.
Well,
Can't
thank
get
you for those nice words, Amy. It's really nice. I just, before Gabby jumps in, I do want to ask David a question. Before, so I do want to admire your framing of your shot with the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter, and that is impressive. And you probably worked all day on that. I'm kidding. I do want to talk about both national and Nevada with both of you, but let me steal your catchphrase, David, and say, have you already seen enough on Nevada's House races? Are they over?
It seems like after everything we've covered the last 10 years, John, we can all assume that they're just going to end up 52-48 for Democrats, right? All three of them. It seems like the great immovable object. But, you know, just to add on to what Amy described, and thank you for having us both here, you look at these polls and you wonder, after reviewing these 7 battleground states and seeing that the only thing they have in common is that neither candidate is hitting 50%. Who the heck are these 3 or 4 or 5% of people left who still can't make up their minds after everything we've seen the past 10 years? And in our research, and you know, Amy and I have been deep into the weeds of a polling project that we did across the 7 battleground states this year. We took a look at the crosstabs of voters who were unsure or supporting third-party candidates on the initial ballot before we pushed them into a choice between Harris and Trump. And, you know, unsurprisingly, these voters deeply dislike both candidates. Now, demographically, what's interesting is that when we aggregate our surveys, these are people who are younger, a little bit more diverse, and skew a little bit more female than the rest of the electorate, which in theory ought to provide more upside for Harris. Those are groups where Democrats typically do well. And yet 68% of them say that Harris is too liberal to effectively serve as president. 70% of them say that Trump is too erratic and out of control to effectively serve as president. But the upside for Trump among this group is that these are voters who are fundamentally pocketbook voters. They don't care as much about abortion or immigration as the partisans do. And to Amy's question about what is this election about? Well, Democrats would like it to be about Dobbs. Republicans would like it to be about the border. But to these voters, it is really a cost of living election. And by 55-26, they trust Trump more than Harris to rein in inflation. And to me, that is one of the bigger warning signs for Harris with 2 weeks to go.
To get at one of the, did you want to go ahead?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I thought he froze for a second. I was worried, but he was just done. Okay, go ahead.
One of the polling dynamics in your all's survey, and you know, across all swing states, across all polling I've seen, is just this delta between the Senate races, where you have an incumbent Democrat, and the presidential races, right? All cycle, John and I have been talking about like who are Trump-Rosen voters, and sort of trying to diagnose who these people are. But and I think we've seen some of the races tighten in, Senate races tighten in Michigan and Wisconsin, not as much in Nevada and Arizona as well. What are you finding is unique about the Senate race in Nevada, or the way people think about the presidential and Senate differently, that explains the delta there?
Yeah, maybe I'll take a stab at this first, and then Amy can chime in. Nevada and Arizona are the 2 Senate races where Republicans' chances have really gone downhill in the past 6 months, and for very different reasons. Look, I think Republicans' nomination of Kari Lake in Arizona, coupled with Kyrsten Sinema's decision not to seek re-election, set up a 2-way race where, you know, the winning candidate essentially has to establish a majority of the vote. And Kari Lake, I don't think there's as much of a pro-Gallego majority in the state as there is an anti-Lake majority in the state. And we're seeing that show up particularly with Gallego overperforming with Hispanic men. But then, my impression of Nevada is that money really matters and campaign organization matters a whole lot. And Sam Brown emerged from the primary in June pretty broke. And that period of time when he was dark on the air, we haven't seen another Democratic incumbent take advantage of their opponent being off the air to the extent that Rosen did, and as effectively as Rosen did. Now, I wouldn't be surprised to see these races close to a 4 or 5 point, or maybe even 3 point gap when we are counting the votes, because partisans at the end of the day tend to come home. But they certainly are very different from the rest of the battlefield, where we're seeing the presidential and the Senate numbers converge a lot more.
Sure. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
We can't hear you, Amy. I'm not sure why. Is it your end or our end?
Oh, maybe I hit mute
Yep,
by
you
accident.
did.
Okay. To Dave's point, the only other place that I would say there is that delta is in Ohio, where we had a similar dynamic of Democrat Sherrod Brown being able to not only raise and spend a great deal of money, but his opponent was dark for weeks after he won the nomination. And it gave Brown the opportunity to really define the race on his terms. And that's one where just the dynamics of Ohio, a state that Trump is going to carry by 8 or 10 points, should just give any Republican a good headwind. And yet Moreno he's not well known at all. So he had to establish himself at some point, which he missed out on over the summer. It is harder as an individual candidate. You all know this quite well in Nevada because this happened last cycle, where, Laxalt wasn't a good fundraiser. The outside groups came in, spent a ton of money, but there is something about a candidate, him or herself, being able to make those campaign ads, to be in those ads in a way that is, I think, beneficial and probably more effective than just having, jillions of dollars of outside group super PAC ads. So, that's one race where at the end of the day, based on just the partisanship alone, Sherrod Brown should be trailing at this point. And the fact that this is a toss-up race also speaks to, I think, the thing that all three of those candidates have in common, the Republican candidates have in common, the money problem, and they have their own individual weaknesses that the Democratic candidate was able to take advantage of.
One of the other dynamics in polling throughout the cycle that I found interesting, and that the Trump campaign is certainly banking on when I talk to them, as well as down ballot Republicans, is the idea of making inroads with Latino voters, young men of color, which you guys brought up. I think part of it is those can also tend to be low propensity voters, and so the bet, right, that the Trump campaign, has said that they're making is turning out these voters. Have you guys seen throughout the cycle any data change with that group, particularly after Harris took over for Biden? And, there was a lot of talk about this in 2022. In Nevada, it didn't happen as much. How are you feeling about that trend of Latino voters moving right this cycle?
I'll let Dave take this because this has been his something that he's been digging into a lot with our own polling. Just one thing I have to say, speaking of, as the old people on this panel, John, you and I remember back in the long ago days, although Dave, you're now a senior member, so you remember this too, that a low propensity voter was known as a Democrat. And these were the folks that, you would say, in looking at the difference between a midterm electorate and a presidential general electorate, is, wow, in states like Nevada or Arizona or in the Central Valley of California, the numbers are going to look better for Democrats in a presidential year because that's when low propensity, younger, diverse voters come and turn out and put Democrats over the top. And alas, that is not the case here in 2020, and instead where Republicans are doing the group they're doing the worst with, and Harris is doing best with, are those that are highly engaged voters. Usually these are older, whiter, more highly educated voters who used to be the people that we thought of as Republicans. So the switch has been quite dramatic to watch. But Dave has been on top of this in our own polling and has some great stuff here to talk about.
Well, we have done a crosstab average of national polls for the first time in our history. We've put that on our site, and we've been tracking various demographic groups. And it's striking that in the summer, Joe Biden was only leading among Hispanic voters 48-42, our average. That would have been down from the 61-37 margin that Catalyst, a data vendor respected by both parties, said that the Biden-Harris ticket won Hispanic voters by in 2020. And that just would have been catastrophic. And I think that's part of the reason why we were seeing such amazing polling numbers for Trump in Nevada and Arizona for the first half of the year. And now Kamala Harris is leading Hispanic voters 54-42, which is double the lead that Biden had in the summer, but half of the lead that the ticket had 4 years ago. And obviously, this is a big reason why things are so precarious for her in the Southwest. It is a challenge for Colin Allred to be able to try and overcome in Texas. I think if we're still seeing Hispanic voters perform for Colin Allred and Kamala Harris the way they performed for Hillary Clinton in 2016 or Beto O'Rourke in 2018, Texas's Senate race might be a legitimate toss-up, but Democrats need just about everything to go right for Allred to win that race, and we still have that in lean Republican. But also keep in mind that that Hispanic voters, particularly Puerto Rican voters, are very influential in Pennsylvania. There's battleground states, and then there's Pennsylvania, which is the biggest prize and has consistently been the closest. And it's not just these mid-sized cities like Reading and Lancaster and Bethlehem. It's also Northeast Philly, where when you talk to Democrats who are on the ground there trying to persuade and turn out these votes, these are voters who Democrats used to think of as their base because they tend to live in these 70-30 or 75-25 precincts. But just because they've voted that lopsided in the past doesn't mean that they are hardcore Democrats. And many of them are truly persuadable. And think back to 2004 when George W. Bush was able to get about 40% of the Hispanic vote. And Trump is, a small notch above that in the polling that we see right now. And I think what it speaks to is, just like other waves of immigrant groups throughout our nation's history, Hispanic voters, as they begin to become more assimilated, are beginning to vote more like the rest of the electorate and base their political identity on things like careers or pocketbook concerns more than ethnic identity.
So let me just drill down a little bit on that, David, if I could, and I'm going to ask this despite your brazenness in trying to make Pennsylvania the We Matter state, when we all know what the We Matter state is. But my serious question to you is this, is that if Kamala Harris only gets 54% of the Hispanic vote in Nevada, she's going to lose Nevada. There's absolutely no question about that. This is coming what a lot of people call the Democratic bedwetting phase of the campaign, and this is one of the things that they're wetting the bed about is the Hispanic vote. It's going south on them. It's not what it used to be. This happened, by the way, in 2022 here. Adam Laxalt was bragging he was going to get 50% of the Hispanic vote. Against the first Latina ever elected to the U.S. Senate. Exit polling showed that she got to 60%, and she barely won the state. Democrats here who are not bedwetting, say, calm down. Most of the Hispanics make their decisions later than most voters. Do you think that's right?
Well, I do think that there's a disproportionate undecided share among Hispanic voters, particularly younger Hispanic voters, and and both men and women. And you're absolutely right. We're seeing the same kind of sub patterns among Hispanic voters that we are among other parts of the electorate. And so we're seeing Republicans improve with rural or culturally rural or conservative Hispanic voters more than urban Hispanic voters. And the Latino vote in both Nevada and Arizona is quite urban because these are, you guys are overwhelmingly an urban state. So I do think that you're right. If Harris is at 55% of the Hispanic vote nationwide, which would be fairly poor, or even 56 or 57, you know, she might be above 60 in Nevada and Arizona, and that might be enough to win, but it's really close.
One of the,
The other thing we noticed in our own battleground polling, and this is across the 7 battleground states, but you know, we asked as a question how people thought about Donald Trump, whether they were supportive of him, like they liked his style and they liked his policies, they didn't like him or his policies, or they are those voters that are I don't like him personally, but I like his policies. And what I noticed when I dug into the don't like him but like his policies, which by the way, this is the swing group. All right, so the I love Trump and everything he does, they're only about 35% of the electorate. The I hate Trump and everything he does is about 47%. Let's say 45 to 47%. So that group of I don't like him and I don't like what I don't like him, but I like his policies are the real swing. And the biggest cohort of voters in that group, you would think would be the sort of Chamber of Commerce, white male types, right? That they are the kinds of folks who've been longtime Republicans who are just clinging on to this idea that, well, Trump may be really different than any kind of Republican we've had before, but at least on, you know, some of those traditional issues like taxes and regulation, he's with us. But actually, it was Latino men that were the biggest cohort in that don't like his personality, but like his policies, which really speaks to the point that David made, that if you're talking about, you know, a group of voters where the economy is a top issue and worries about getting ahead or being able to provide for your family and are paramount to you, starting your own business, whatever it is, he is seen as stronger on those issues. And yet there still is a price that he's paying, Trump that is, for his behavior. And so that's where, you know, again, these were folks in our September poll who were saying this. So that goes to your point, John, about the late deciders. It's because you've got a lot of those Latino men in particular who are feeling that push-pull between kind of liked when inflation was lower, think he's better on the economy, but what is he going to be like when he's in office?
So we have to wrap up here, and I want to thank you both again for being here, but I want to just ask a final question, if I may, which is when you two go into the Cook Political Report smoke-filled back room and rank the swing states in terms of their likelihood to go for Trump, where does Nevada rank?
Ooh, that's a really good one. You know, I always look to John Ralston and what he says about this. And when he tells me he's feeling confused and can't do early and that the early vote is not as helpful as it once was. I get confused too. Um, of all the states that I think are the likeliest to flip to, this is what you're saying. What would be the states that he lost last time that he'd be the most likely to flip this time?
Yes.
Yeah. Um, I put it lower on the list than, so I don't know what number that would be, but like, I think it's more likely that a state like like Pennsylvania, I know you matter too, but that one would likely flip before Nevada. Um, Here's my question. I have this debate with myself and others all the time about the Arizona Nevada divide. And by the numbers, Arizona looks better just by the polling for Trump than it does in the We Matter state. And yet the coalition in Arizona, especially if we're thinking about the suburban coalition, is strong for Democrats, would be stronger in a place like Arizona. So I guess I'll go with where the data is, and that Arizona is more likely to flip before you guys do.
David, I know you have to attend to family matters, so quickly, please tell me what you think.
No, I was prepared to stay all night, But look, maybe I'll take a slightly different path here. I think the McCain legacy vote in Arizona is, at the end of the day, very tough for a candidate like Trump to win. And the polls are what they are right now, and we've kind of seen the state's fortunes flip as Harris has become the nominee. Arizona has been more reluctant to creep up in the polls for her than Nevada has been. But the one demographic group that Amy and I keep wondering about the most, are the polls really going to reflect what's going on with them, are non-college whites. And Nevada has the lowest college degree holder share of these battleground states. And that blue collar component, are polls underestimating Trump once again among that group? And if they are, then he probably has a bit more upside in Nevada relative to where the polls stand today.
As Trump famously said in 2016, reading crosstabs during of a poll in a Reno rally, I love the poorly educated.
He said that in Reno. I did not realize
yes,
that.
Yes, exactly what happened. Listen, Amy and David, it's been to kind of twist it. I could never have seen enough of either of you, and so I really appreciate your taking the time to come out and Zoom with us today. Good luck in this election. I think we're all going to need it.
Indeed.
You're the best, John. And now I've learned my lessons over the years. Don't cross John Ralston on predictions.
Yeah, I should have done the mic drop 2 years ago, but that's a different story. Thanks again for coming, you guys. Really appreciate it.
Bye, guys.
All right.
Thanks, Gabby.
Thank you.